Hello and welcome to another episode of the Christian Reeve podcast. Today's guest is a podcaster, a NFL pundit, a senior international officer at the Dublin City University, and a bunch of other things. And he goes by the name Colum Cronin. Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Thanks very much, Christian. Delighted to have the opportunity to have a chat to you. I juggle a few different things, no more than yourself. It keeps it entertaining, certainly.
Yeah, I do actually wonder how you find all the time to do all of these things. Like, as I was breaking down all these notes, I was like, damn, this guy's busy.
Yeah, I think, and that's a word I actually try not to use. A few years ago, right, I made a conscious decision. I said, we all talk, when you ask people how they are, right, the two things you hear constantly, I'm busy and I'm tired. And it's like, we're all busy and we're all tired. So I made a conscious decision a few years ago that try not to use that. Like, because I get it, because it's my choice, a lot of this. So I'm choosing to add to my schedule. Will probably be a little bit different if I had, kids running around, then I totally get why people would be exhausted. But this is stuff I want to do that I'm choosing to do. And I'm fortunate in terms of that NFL stuff and some of the podcasting I do. My co-host on the Higher Ed podcast is in California. So being 8 hours behind, a lot of the interviews that we do and the recordings that we do tend to be at night. So I'm able to do the work side of things and then do the podcasting side of things.
Yeah, I can completely relate to that. I mean, I do feel, though, that it takes a certain type of, how you say, like a mindset, I would say, because for me, I've had jobs over the years in various different fields and industries where, I'd had those exact feelings, oh, this is long, I don't like this, it's strenuous, blah, blah, blah. But like the thing that I put that down to is like, if you don't enjoy what you do, then of course it's going to feel that way. But if you do enjoy the things that you do, then I don't know, you don't notice that as much. Like, I do feel like, for example, last month and now this month, for me on the podcast, it's been extremely busy. And I knew that, like, as soon as I was done with all this, I'd need to take like at least a sort of a week's break as far as just podcasting was concerned. And, it was the same old thing. I felt really good afterwards. But, all that stuff that goes into the, creation process and editing and all these different things, it's just a necessary part of everything. But I wouldn't say it's particularly strenuous or anything. I think it really does come down, like I said, to the mindset thing. I mean, I've had jobs where even marketing, which, is more kind of my more recent field, it gets like that sometimes. Like, I love to write, but, I suppose if you're not fully passionate about it, then it does become a bit of a slog, so to speak.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. I think it's spot on. When you enjoy something, it makes it so much easier. And especially when any job, there'll be aspects to it potentially, even if you really love it, that possibly, unless maybe you're working for yourself, even then though, are you really going to enjoy doing taxes? But I think it's about, trying to find what you enjoy and utilizing that aspect of it. So in terms of, say, even the NFL stuff, obviously, like I love having the opportunity to talk about it and chat to former players and coaches and all that stuff. There's a lot of work that goes in, as you know, in terms of prepping for all of this stuff. That can sometimes be like, tedious, and you're trying to find stuff out, and you're digging, and you're like on the 17th page of a Google search, let alone going oh, I found it on the first. But it's worth it. It's when you see what comes out the other side and you're really happy with what you've produced. There's a joy that comes from that, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, you mentioned the NFL. Let's talk about that. So you're a pundit on this Irish NFL show, or it's called the Irish NFL show, and then there's also one called Broncos Europe. So you're a pundit on several of these different shows. How did this come to be? And how popular is the NFL in Ireland? Because I know that sports in general are very popular in Ireland. I know the Premier League, for example, is popular there. But talk to us a little bit about the NFL in Ireland.
Sure. You're spot on when you say sport in general is popular in Ireland. Irish people love sport, and back when I was growing up, they started showing NFL highlights on RT television,
Oh,
and
okay.
so on a Monday night they would show NFL highlights and Serie A highlights, right? So you had this Italian football, and
Cool.
I just got fascinated by, well, by both, but by the NFL. And there was a team that played in neon orange at the time, and they had a quarterback at wearing number 7 who just seemed to scramble, and he was here, there, and everywhere. And I just fell in love with that team,
Yeah.
and that was Denver Broncos. And I call it an affliction of sorts, because it has been this kind of roller coaster, heartbreaking journey. My mother allowed me to stay up to watch the Super Bowl that the Broncos got in, and they got beaten 55-10 by the San Francisco 49ers. Now, even
Right.
if you're not a fan of the sport, you will, just by hearing that scoreline, you'll understand what kind of a beating that was. And that was the first sporting event I cried over. There have been great moments since, but there definitely been some heartbreaking moments. And the fact that Dublin is 7 hours ahead of Denver, again,
Mm.
it means watching games can be interesting. So generally, the Broncos play at around about 9 p.m. on a Sunday. But if they play on a Sunday night game, that game won't kick off until about 1:30 in the morning, which means that it won't finish till about probably 4:30 at best, closer to 5 a.m. Then you've got all that adrenaline. Then you're trying to roll into work the next day. And then if they play on a Monday night game, that kicks off generally at about 3:30 in the morning. And yeah, to be honest, in some ways that's better than late Sunday night, because when a Monday game, you can go to bed at like 10, get yourself about 5 hours sleep, and then like as soon as the game ends, you're going straight into work. The Monday night game, if you go to bed at 10, you're only, getting kind of 3 hours at best. And afterwards, as I said, you've got all the adrenaline. So that's tough. And there's Thursday night football. So it definitely is. It requires commitment. And in some ways, the internet has been both brilliant, but also been meant that like I can now, because of Game Pass, I can watch every game. Previously, like there was a period, they showed highlights right in the late 80s, early 90s, and then they stopped doing that. And then there was a period where I'm kind of late into secondary school and in college, not like you have loads of money, so I
Yeah.
didn't have the Sky package to watch it. So I'm trying to follow the games just by reading about them kind of the day afterwards. Then streaming starts. Now you can watch every game. And no matter how bad the Broncos have some brilliant years, but the last few years we haven't been good. But Bill Hicks has a great line about like being like the guy with a sore tooth and you can't stop touching it. That's me with the Broncos. I have to watch it. I just drawn to it. The sport itself, in terms of its popularity in Ireland, I would say I mean, it's not super popular, but it has grown. And some of that is down to how much Ireland has changed in such a short space of time. Like Ireland went from we exported people. That's what we did in Ireland. We were real good at exporting people all around the world. And then in the 90s, we had this kind of Celtic Tiger economy, and we began to attract all of these tech companies. And Dublin is now known as the Silicon Valley of Europe, because all of these massive tech companies have their European headquarters there. So you have a lot of people who've come over from the United States, which has, helped to increase the popularity of the league. People now have access to the games, and the league themselves have put a lot of effort into I suppose, trying to grow the popularity of the sport. So it's certainly grown in popularity. I usually go to a pub in Dublin, the Woolshed. We do a lot of meetups and watch parties there. And when I first came to Dublin, I'm in Dublin 15 years. When I first came to Dublin 15 years ago, there weren't that many people going to the Woolshed. There was a hardcore of us. And now the Woolshed have opened up. They have a back room that's dedicated to NFL games. They show all the games there. And it's great because you get fans of all the different teams. So it's still niche, but it's definitely grown, and I would say continuing to grow.
This might sound like a silly question, but I only ask because I've seen in the UK that there's been like I suppose that the emergence of teams in I don't know exactly if they actually compete in the NFL or if it's a UK only league or whatever, but basically there's like, they're teaching American football in schools, and there are some teams or something like that. So I guess I've got sort of two questions to you with regards to that. A being, do you have any kind of like Irish based football teams, American football teams? And also, do you often get like them coming over to Ireland and playing? I don't know, like in any particular large stadiums that you have, like what's the deal there?
So yeah, there are teams in Ireland. There is an the Irish American Football Association who run
Oh,
a
cool.
league. And there are actually quite a few teams. So there are two divisions, and then you have kids leagues and stuff like that. I used to go to a lot of those games working in higher ed, like the universities that I worked at. Trinity had an American football team. UCD, where I worked, had an American football team. So I'd go and watch the students play, because I working with international students, I would have gotten to know them. So it was good. And where my current institution, DCU, doesn't have a team at the moment, that's something I'd love to see come back. But I suppose that those tend to be for fun. There's nobody's making any money off that. They're not professional leagues. They're purely amateur, that people are playing. We do host college games in Ireland. So the big colleges from the United States would come over. Generally, there have been one a year. Obviously, COVID changed that last year. There's a game scheduled for this year. When someone like Notre Dame, obviously huge Irish connections, despite the name, but the tagline is the Fighting Irish. Well, I think the last time Notre Dame came, they brought in and around 35,000 people from the States with them for a college game, which was unbelievable. Town was just packed. It was a great atmosphere. Trinity, where I was working at the time, hosted a lot of the pre-game stuff they have for a lot of the college games. But like Boston College came over, Penn State came over.
Wow.
Yeah, it's always really good fun. So the college games take place here. The NFL games take place in London. There is talk of the NFL potentially, now this is further down the line, but potentially looking to play kind of more international games, and to look to play games in the likes of Dublin, Rio, Tokyo, etc.
Forgive my ignorance here as well, but do you have any like major stadiums in Ireland that sort of could theoretically like hold that kind of capacity? Because obviously you mentioned you had like 30,000 fans in one instance there. I mean, I'd say like you'd need somewhere between, I suppose, 60 on the lower end to about 100,000 capacity, give or take. But like, do you have any major stadiums like that? I mean, you've got rugby, you've got football, so there's huge Irish teams. So I'm wondering, like, there must be stadiums.
Yeah, no, there are. There is what your viewers probably aren't familiar with is the Ireland has its own native sports. So
Yes.
Gaelic football and hurling, and they're all under the GAA, and the GAA has Croke Park, and Croke Park at one point Wembley may have surpassed it when it was redeveloped, but certainly Croke Park, in and around almost 87,000, was the third largest stadium.
Right.
I think the new Wembley might have surpassed it, but that would be the largest. The only thing about Croke Park is because on Gaelic football and hurling, it's 15 aside, the pitches tend to be a bit bigger. So a soccer pitch or an American football field is a lot smaller. So it kind of now with an American football, you have the sideline where you have a lot of all the players and coaches, so it's fine there. But when soccer has been played, or in Croke Park, it can look really small on that pitch. But we also have a stadium, the Old Lansdowne Road, which is used with the rugby and the soccer or football team national teams share that. That stadium holds about 55,000. So there would be kind of stadiums throughout the country, ranging from Croke Park being the largest and the other stadium in Dublin, which is 55, to kind of 30, 40, 45,000 seater stadiums around the country. Now, outside of Dublin, all of those other large stadiums at that level would be GAA. You have a big rugby stadium in Limerick, all right, but it wouldn't be at the size of some of the GAA grounds. But I would say Croke Park could certainly host an NFL game. It would have the big enough. Back in the day, it hosted a Muhammad Ali fight. So it has been used for different events. Used for a lot of like U2, obviously, when they do their homecoming concerts, it's always there. And there was always talk at one point when he back when he was popular that Conor McGregor would have there'd be a UFC fight in. I don't know if that was ever likely to happen given the time differences and stuff like that. But that was always the talk. There'd be a fight in Croke Park because you could have so many people there. So yeah, it's interesting. One of the Rooneys, so the Rooney family owned the Pittsburgh Steelers, and one of the Rooneys was actually the American ambassador to Ireland under Obama. And there was talk during that period that he might bring them over. It never happened. The college games came in instead. But the league is certainly looking to expand. It knows it has an international audience, and that is the only way you'll really grow that is actually to go to those places. So who knows? Let's see. It would certainly be quite the party if an NFL team came, because tailgating at an NFL game is unlike anything. And I've been to plenty of Premier League games and stuff, but tailgating at an NFL game is different to anything else I've experienced.
Thanks for sharing that. One of the things you mentioned in there was about Gaelic football. Now, I'm aware of Gaelic football as a concept, but I don't actually know like the differences there. Now, you mentioned that the pitches are larger compared to standard football, and you said, was it 15 men aside? Was that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Are there any like other major differences between Gaelic football and traditional football? I'd just like to learn a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I suppose Gaelic football it's a bit like a cross between traditional football and rugby in certain ways.
Okay.
Because you can pick the ball up with your hands, you can carry it, but you have to carry it for three steps. Then you either have to bounce it or solo it, kick it. You can't just pick it up and run.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it is different in that respect. It's much more physical than traditional football. Liam Gallagher is a massive fan. He was tweeting out how much he loved it because the All-Ireland, the championship took place actually because of COVID in the winter this year. It's traditionally in the summertime, but it was on in December, so he was obviously watching it. So that would be the big difference. It's a very fast sport, but hurling. So I grew up in County Cork, which is down south in Ireland, and Cork is the largest county. So we're traditionally good enough in both football but particularly strong in hurling. And hurling is an amazing sport. If you haven't seen hurling, if there's anyone listening or watching and you haven't, check it out on YouTube. Hurling it's like a cross between the American sport lacrosse, field hockey, and murder. It's amazing. It's the fastest field sport in the world. It is so skillful. You hit a ball that's kind of the size of a baseball or a field hockey ball. Guys can go up and catch it in their hand. It really is. It's unlike anything you will have seen. So fast, so physical, so skillful, because the guys, I mean, they're having the sticks they use are again similar to field hockey sticks in many ways. They've a bigger base, if you can imagine that, but they're able to manipulate the ball, and people are just amazed at, because that ball, you're going up to catch it and the ball is coming at you at like it's been hit like a baseball. It's coming at you at 70 miles an hour and you're going up having to catch it. It's fascinating, and it is outside of my three favorite sports would be the NFL, traditional football, and hurling. Those three are the most fun to watch.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. Switching it up, moving it forward. You're the co-host of an award-winning podcast called Adventures in Advising. Tell us about how this podcast came to be and what kinds of topics you tend to discuss on there.
Sure, yeah. So I suppose it's a higher ed podcast, and
Right.
advising would probably be better known in the UK as personal tutoring in many respects. The way in which it came about was I've always been interested in stories, right? And Irish people love stories, and I love stories, love hearing other people's stories, which is why I have podcasts and why I used to do a series of video interviews.
Okay.
When I worked in higher ed, I just found that large institutions, people didn't know each other necessarily because they were so big, and you can be kind of working almost in silos, and students didn't know everybody. And so I felt it was a great way for international students to get to know people around the university, because we respond to people, we respond to faces, we respond to stories. So if I did a quick interview, and it would be just on my phone camera, when and I talk to the librarian, and I'd say, just tell me about like what using the library at this university is like. Because for a lot of us, depending on where you've gone to secondary school, using the library at a university, it's totally different, and for international students it can be really different. So it was talking to them about that. So I built this up, and I did a series that I called Meet and Retweet. And so they'd only be like 2-minute, they could be 2-minute max, but people seem to really like them. And so I was at a conference a few years ago, and the executive director of that organization, the CADA, who are kind of the overarching group for advisors around the world, anyone kind of working in student support in many respects. And I was at the conference, and Charlie Nutt, the executive director, introduced me to Matt Markin, and said, hey, you do videos, Matt does really cool videos, you guys should probably have a chat and see if there's stuff you could learn. So we did, and we got on really well, discovered there were lots we could learn from each other. We worked well, and Charlie said, why don't you guys make a video before the end of the conference? I want to see what you can do. So we did. And it wasn't even just one video, we ended up making a couple of them, and it went really well. And there was a follow-up. Charlie really liked what we did, so there was a follow-up conference a few months later, and at that we started doing some video interviews, a little bit longer but still relatively short. And then we were talking, and people liked them, but people were saying it can be tough to get time to sit down to actually, listen to them. Be great if, they were available. And so we said, what about doing a podcast? And so the first the first few episodes were made up of some of the interviews that we had done at that conference that was in Louisville in Kentucky. It took some time to get it right, as I'm sure you've experienced, that initially. And we had done, it's not like we did the research and stuff, but trying to get a recording platform that worked well, because this was a few years ago, and we, Zoom wasn't what it is now, and I suppose even in terms of getting it all together, so it took us it was our third time recording where it worked properly and we got it up and running. So that podcast's been running for about a year now. Okay. We talk to so advisors, so people working as advisors or personal tutors. We talk to people working as support staff. We talk to people working in Res Life. We talk to faculty members. We talk to students themselves. So anything kind of within higher ed, I suppose it's a way of kind of A, hearing somebody's story, and B, kind of sharing knowledge. So when you go to a conference, a lot of times you can't go to everything, and you may be getting a half an hour slot. Whereas our interviews can be, an hour, and it allows us to talk to the person maybe in a little bit more informal way and a little bit more relaxed, get to know them a little bit, find out like how they came to work in higher ed, what some of their passions are, and then to discuss the topic. So it's kind of like a conference presentation plus. And so it's gone really well, which has been great. We've been very fortunate to have fantastic guests come on, and the response to it has been really good. We just released episode 26, so we've been kind of releasing an episode every couple of weeks. And I suppose it's just looking, because higher ed and third level is just such a big area, and there's so much happening. It's even thinking about things like PhD supervision, right? If you're doing a PhD, like who trains, or how do supervisors learn how to be a PhD supervisor? How does that relationship work? If you're doing a PhD in English literature, that's a 3 or 4 year undertaking where you're working directly with a supervisor. You don't have a research lab. That relationship is really important. So looking about, because again, it's not like there are classes that teach you to be a PhD student. How do I manage that relationship? So it's trying to look at things like that, trying to look at kind of the way in which technology has impacted on higher ed, trying to look at, different groups of students, maybe students with disabilities, how did they experience higher ed, what's their access like. So we've covered a lot of different topics, but it's always with a focus both on sharing, the experience, sharing the knowledge, but the story aspect to it, the conversational aspect to it, is really central to the podcast as well.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing, man. Appreciate it. So it sounds like it's a kind of an all-round resource then, because when you were first talking about it, I thought like, okay, maybe it's just sort of like a student resource, a useful one, don't get me wrong, but like, that's kind of maybe the target audience. But it kind of sounds like it's for everyone who's just involved in higher ed. It's like kind of a all-round kind of resource. And I'd say like probably one of the best types, because obviously when I went to university, I did a lot of work as like a student ambassador and all this stuff. And those days were very useful in kind of giving people a flavor of what university is like. But I never felt like those days or the video resources we would do would ever quite like fully encapsulate it. So I feel like, things like what you're doing is a bit more informative and gives a more accurate reflection of, well, this is how this works, and this is what you can come to expect in first year, second year, as you said, PhD year. It's a useful resource.
Yeah, our aim is probably at staff and faculty primarily. Okay. But one of the things, I suppose, we've had students on the podcast because students are central to, like, universities don't exist without students. If otherwise you're just a research institute. Right. But for students who have listened to the podcast and come back to me, they have said, that was amazing because I now understand the motivations behind the decisions. I know why my supervisor said this. I know why my advisor recommended that I do this course, or recommended that I speak to this somebody, or I now understand, why they were saying that this piece of technology might be good. Because a lot of times, again, when you're, and one of the bugbears that I have is when I go to conferences and I hear people talk about students as this like totally weird, distinct group that behave like, oh, students are always on their phone, and you look around the conference room and everyone's on their phone. Right. Or students don't read emails. Well, they do, right? That they get so many of them. They're like any of us. I have, and I certainly know my email inbox. I see what comes into it. Yeah, that looks interesting. Oh, I need to respond to that. Students get bombarded all the time. So they're people, and I think they're just people with maybe sometimes the majority of them, obviously you have mature students, etc., but they have a little bit less life experience than the people working generally in the university. So they don't always understand the motivations behind things, and we don't always take the time or have the time to explain the motivations behind things to them. And so when they have the opportunity to hear about it, it makes it clearer for everybody. Just try and pull the curtain back a little bit, show the man behind the curtain, and everybody kind of benefits from that. Universities being this mysterious place that students are in without fully understanding, I don't think you get the real benefit from it. Like, it shouldn't just be like school where you go, you sit down, you learn. Students should be, for me, my thinking again, I'm sure, I don't know, maybe not everyone would agree, but I think students should be involved in every facet of university life, because without them, the institution doesn't exist. And certainly in my experience, because I've managed students working, like you say, you worked as an ambassador, so I managed those previously. I've always found students to be absolutely unbelievable. Nobody is as invested in an institution as a student. And so if you train a student, support a student, they will come up with some brilliant ideas. And sometimes people say, oh, are you not worried they'll make mistakes? I'm like, anyone can make mistakes. I make mistakes. Staff make mistakes all the time. It's about I really think students are unlikely to, if you were, again, it's about working with them, and supporting them and training them. I don't think they're, this idea that they're going to go off and do something absolutely crazy is not my experience.
I do think a big important part about this as well is the university itself and its approach. And I'm not wording this very well, but what I mean is, for instance, the university I went to was research focused. And as I began to understand while studying there, and then obviously hearing about other people's experiences at other universities, obviously they were very heavy on the academic route. They are trying to sell you that. They want you to go down that route. But, they were a bit more, they would work more with you. Do you know what I mean? They wanted you to do well. They wanted you to kind of succeed and be as invested as possible, because it's that is going to benefit them. So for example, I know this is probably common practice at all universities, but all of the seminar tutors that we would have would predominantly be PhD students. And it was interesting because some of them obviously, they don't want to go into teaching. They just want to do the academic route, whereas others were really passionate about the teaching as well, and as part of it. But it's kind of like two worlds coming together, the teaching aspect and then the actual research based aspect. I think a lot of people do forget about the fact that universities historically were obviously, as you said, before, research institutes that then kind of opened their doors and started teaching people. But that's the ideal way to kind of teach someone, in a way, is to tutor them from level 0 upwards. And then the main thing that you're looking for is their creativity. So if you're doing a maths degree or something like that, fundamentally that person is going to be good at maths and be creative in that field. So you want to kind of give them the tools that they can use and kind of build themselves up, so that when they do get up the sort of the level of all their peers, they'll be able to kind of formulate their ideas in the kind of the way that institution does their research. For example, I've noticed a lot of students and people in general, academics, tend to go and study at different universities. And I always used to find that interesting, why don't they just stay at the same institution? But I think that it's essential that you do that, because then you get different kind of approaches and different understandings, and then you can kind of apply that to your research and the papers that you obviously produce after the fact.
Yeah, and I think every institution has its own culture, in the same way every organization has its own culture. And so I think the best institutions will look to blend that research and that teaching. And I know that there's a feeling amongst some that there is almost too much focus on research because universities have been forced to become commercial entities in many respects, right? There's been a cut in government funding across the Western world, and so universities have to find new ways to fund themselves. A lot of that is research output, and so it becomes, I don't know if you've heard the term publish or perish, and so your focus as a lecturer is, what are you publishing? Okay, because you're bringing in, if you're publishing, chances are you're getting a research grant. You're basically funding yourself, right? And the university will get a slice of that research grant. Also, you can buy yourself out of teaching. So one of the, I mean, that it's not, don't get wrong, it's not everywhere, not all the time, but one of the things that's important, I think, is that students, even first year students, have access to their lecturers, and that it's not just adjunct faculty that are brought in just to teach a course, because a lot of times for those adjunct faculty, they don't have the same employment rights as a full-time lecturer. They're paid purely for their time, and then, like, over the summer, good luck to you now, bye-bye. And it's the experience for the students as well. So for me, you want to have people who are engaged in really top research, but who are still accessible to students. So it's about trying to find that blend and to marry that together. You're not expecting your top researchers to teach every single, like, 60 undergraduate credits, but like they should be available to them, like, because I think it's partly aspirational. I mean, if you go into university as a first year and you are, like, are being taught by somebody who is at the top of their field, that is very inspiring, and that you can say, that's what I aspire to that. Whereas if all if instead that it is just, well, if it's all graduate students who are teaching you, right, because they're filling in place of the lecturer, and they're like, well, I'm filling in here, this isn't necessarily my course, but I'm here to deliver the material, that has an impact. So I think it's about finding the balance. I think that's what the best institutions do. I think as well, it's recognizing that there are like, research and teaching is a fundamental aspect of it, and it's a foundational aspect of it, but they're people-centered institutions as well, right? These are students who are in there. We're all people. So I think that has a huge role to play in education, and recognizing that relationships play a huge role. And so that is, to me, is really important, that there is a person-centered approach in an institution, and they value people, both in terms of the people who are working there and the people who are studying there.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you. While you were talking, it was just reminding me of university, to be honest, and being back in the lecture halls and stuff. Because the funny thing was as well, we had I studied management with marketing, and the way that the course was structured was, the first year was foundation, as with most degrees, where it's kind of it's not even really focused on your specialism. It's still like you can still change your degree path at that point. So I only had like a little taste of marketing there. It was more, it was like everything, statistics, international business, a range of different things. And obviously throughout the rest of the years, it got more focused on marketing. But one of the things I do remember was that we had many different lecturers, and many of them were, as you say, people that would come in for one-offs, or like they do like maybe a series of lectures and then they would go away, which was kind of problematic because sometimes you would have contradictions. So like that lecturer would say a bunch of stuff that maybe is contradicted by what's being said in the seminars and the course leader. So you'd be like, well, who do I believe? Because they're all at the same level. They're all professors. So it's like, it's not that it's wrong. And this is the thing about academia as well. There's all these different prevailing opinions. And so it's like, you can never technically be wrong. It's just an opinion and stuff. And like, that's kind of the fun of it though. Like one of the things I discovered later on was that, when they give you a reading list, so here's a tip, university students, right? When they give you the reading list, that doesn't mean that you're supposed to read the whole reading list. What it means is these are suggested readings, and if you read through them, they'll have different opinions. So best thing to do is like read the summary of them and kind of look at like, well, what do I agree with more? And then focus on that. And then you can find, additional sources that aren't listed elsewhere, through, what is it? Google, I can't remember the name of the thing where you type into Google and it brings up only journalistic.
Oh yeah, the Google, I mean the reference guides. Yeah, I know
Yeah, I
what
can't remember what it's called.
I know what you're
There's,
talking about.
there's like a specific like search thing you have to put into Google, and it only brings the journals up. But my
Yes.
mind's gone blank. Well,
But
anyway.
it's exactly that. I suppose it comes back to critical thinking, and it comes back to recognizing as well that you can really admire a writer, a researcher, a person, and think a lot of their work is great, but not think all of it is great. Nobody is perfect. Nobody's going to
Of
have
course.
everything right. And if you find yourself agreeing with everything a person is saying, then you should probably wonder, what's going on here? Because I certainly they're like writers and authors that I really admire, but there are things they say that I say, not sure about that. So I think university should be about, especially at that foundational level, you're spot on, and it's about learning to recognize bias and to recognize that we all bring our own biases to everything that we write. And I suppose it can be, that's one of the big transitions from secondary school, I feel, because you're not, or certainly I wasn't, and you're not taught to question what you're being given, because they don't want you to do that in school, right? But at university level, that's really important. So I think that's one area that we probably need a little bit more on, is to teach younger people about and in some ways social media has been really good about that, about trying to teach people about like to how to critically assess things, because when we don't do that, then that leads to all sorts of problems later on, when you cannot discern what's real, what's not real, who's coming to you with genuine information, who's looking to spin things, etc., etc.
Yeah, again, couldn't agree more. I was very lucky. I went to a very good school. It was a public school, but it was they did teach critical thinking, so I lucked out on that one. But as all schools are, at least in the UK, and by the sounds of things, Ireland too, at school and A level, you essentially learn like a wrong way of learning, because as soon as you come to university, you have to obviously learn self-study, independent study. And obviously at school and A level, I suppose it depends on your course tutors, but for the most part, you are kind of fed information, fed opinions, fed all of this. And that's just not the case at uni. I mean, you get given the tools, and obviously depending on the university you go, it will sort of impact on how much you're given and how useful the stuff that you're given actually is. Like I quickly realized that like textbooks, I mean, there is some use in them, but I felt like the journals were way more useful, to be honest. My personal approach when I was at uni was that the lectures, I stopped going to the lectures towards the end because A, I didn't have time, and B, I just wasn't getting anything from them. I realized like pretty much everything was being covered in the textbooks. Not all of the lecturers. Some of the lecturers, you'd go there and like, I remember there was this one guy, he was a Brazilian guy, and he was just the most entertaining lecturer I've ever had in my life. And I didn't even like his subject, but I loved listening to him. So I'd just go for that. But I always went to the seminars. I never missed a seminar. They were, because I think the key thing with the seminars was obviously you're in a small room with your peers, plus sometimes you'd be lucky to have the course tutor, so the professor there, or you'd have the PhD students or whatever, but you could discuss ideas and you could be like, okay, where do we sit with this? Where do we sit with that? What are the prevailing arguments for and against, blah, blah, blah. And I felt like that was really, really useful, particularly if you kind of are getting stuck on an idea, or you just, I don't know, you got sort of like writer's block, but in the context of your studies, that's a really good way to go, oh yeah, I hadn't considered this, and oh, there's this and that. And yeah, I mean, I guess my point is, like, at university you have to do it your own way, but that's kind of the exciting part about it, is you figure out what's your own way, what works for you specifically as an individual, and then you use that and run with that. And yeah, it's
No,
interesting.
I do think that's a very fair point. It is figuring it out, and it's figuring out what way you learn as well, right? I learned through listening, and so for me, going to lectures was important because it meant that I took it in. I didn't have to revise that part of it. I could read about other things. Other people are different, and that is part of the beauty of it. But I think the engagement piece is the most important piece, more than always going to everything. And different people, again, will learn in different ways. But as long as you're engaging with the material and engaging with your course, I think that is the important piece. When you're not engaging, when you're apathetic, that is because, as you said, even if you didn't really like the material, he engaged you, right? That lecturer engaged you, and therefore you were willing to go along to it. If equally, like, you can have a strong response against certain material that you're learning, but if it's eliciting a strong response, at least it's doing something. It's where you're apathetic and where I've just like completely lost interest. That's the concern.
See, and here's the thing, like, the point you make is spot on, honestly. I couldn't agree more. Like, it really does come down to how you learn and what works best for you. But I remember students at my uni, and you know who you are, were very, very apathetic. And I'm like, I mean, I kind of understand when you're at school and you're learning stuff that you never use in your day-to-day life and never will use. But at the same time, when you're at university, you're paying to be there. You know, like, I remember I was 21 when I first started going to uni. I was 24 when I graduated. And there were times when I get a bit like frustrated or get a bit sick of things. But I always saw it through. And I always kind of remembered thinking, like, you wanted to do this. You wanted to change your life by doing this. It's important to you. And why would you waste your time, you know, doing things in this manner? Why would you, you know, spend all this money to be here for 3 years of your life to then just sit and treat it like school? Like, I never understood that. And maybe it's like a maturity thing, I don't know, but I always try to look at it on a logical basis. Like, you're wasting your time and your money, and it's like you said, there's always going to be a part of it that will work for you. You know, if the lectures don't work for you, the seminars don't work for you, there will be something within that you'll be able to engage with. Like, I saw so many different types of study. I saw people making endless notes. I saw, you know, I used to do audio recordings sometimes. That was helpful. You know, I mentioned the seminars, you know, even people that just read the journals or the books and just did that, you know, whatever works for you. But like, I mean, Christ, we even had study groups that we arranged in third year, which really helped. And I even found myself, which I never thought I'd be doing, in the library. I was there all the time, man. You know, with the whiteboards, writing stuff, and trying to do, you know, like, I don't know what it's called, where you associate things with like certain words, like a whole bunches of text with a short word.
Word association.
Precisely. Yeah. So you get creative with it, and obviously, being at uni, especially if it's like a campus-based uni, you're always around people, and you can always kind of bounce ideas off or learn about how other people, ways that people do things, and kind of basically just test and try and see what works. But yeah, I'll never understand those people. I mean, I remember there was one guy, I hope he eventually graduated, but I remember when we started in the same year, and then I think when I was in third year, he was redoing first year for like the second or third time. And I was like, damn. I mean, and from what I understood, he just basically partied the whole time and just messed around. And yeah, I mean, everyone messes around a bit in the first year, but you still, like, even when I think back to first year, it's like, yeah, we partied a lot, but I also spent a lot of time in the library as well. Like, it's just kind of never stopped, you know.
I'd in some ways almost admire that though, then like him partying, at least he was enjoying it. It's the people who are
Okay.
just continue to do it but don't get any enjoyment out of it, because that bleeds into your life as well. Like I've worked with enough people who over the years who don't like what they do and yet remain in situ and never change jobs. And that's what I mean. Like, why, if you're on a course, a 3 or 4 year course, and you don't like it, why not change? Like, it's not a life sentence. A judge did not decide this for you. You can change. And that's where I say people and students, you know, like it's the same. Like you see the same traits everywhere. But yeah, if you're unhappy with something, change it. You know, you get one go at this life thing, at least that we remember. So go and change it, make the most of it.
When I was 18, I was in and I've mentioned this many times, so my listeners will be fully aware of this. So I won't go into full details, but basically I was working in this like supermarket job. I hated it. It was what it was. Now, I remember having that exact feeling of like, oh, I hate this. I'm so miserable, blah, blah, blah. And what I really needed was someone to give me, pardon my language, like a kick up the arse and basically just, but that's the thing. That doesn't often happen in life. You know, maybe you have some strong parents that will do that for you. Maybe you have some people in your life. You need positive people around you, really. You need to avoid negative people and be around positive people. But yeah, it all comes down to you. And for me, the changes happened when I was like, do you know what? I'm so sick and tired of this. I'm going to change this. And I started studying again, did like a brief college course, and then went back into university after that. Went to university for the first time. And from that point onwards, my life has just been totally different. And now that's how I approach everything. It's like, okay, here's an opportunity. Here's something different. Here's an opportunity to learn, to try something different, and etc. I really think it does come down to your attitude towards life. Like if you just don't have the right attitude, you will become one of those people that just sits and complains but never does anything about it. Like, I'm not going to say I never moan about things, but the difference with me is that I'll moan about it a bit, but then I'll work my ass off and still try and change things, because that's the only thing that will change things. Moaning, complaining doesn't change anything.
No, unless it motivates you to make a change. But that's what you have to do, is make. And I'm not saying like if you don't like your job, immediately quit your job. No, not at all. And
no, you have to have like an action plan at least.
Yeah, exactly. Like because I remember years ago, right? I was in a job I hated, right? And I was like, no, it's just not worth it. And I have a really good friend, guy named Keane. He's brilliant, and he's just so he's really good for advice. And I talked to him, and I said, I just think I'm just going to quit. He's like, well, how are you going to pay rent? Like, it's not like, you know, you have parents who can pay your rent or anything. Like, how are you going to do this? And he said to me, he's like, what if you, you know, you can go to work and you still have time in the evenings to, you know, apply for jobs. He said there's nothing stopping. It's not like work is impeding you're applying for jobs. And so it's about, I'm not saying that because I would be the, you know, it's not like quit your job and life will suddenly happen. No, you have to make a plan. But like, don't just sit there thinking it can't get better. It can. It absolutely can, and you can find something that is so much better. Even I remember back in, and it was a simple change. I worked back in college. I started working back when we had video shops, right? But it was right at when technology was kind of coming in, but the issue was technology wasn't good enough. We were having to register everything like on the computer, but also in the book, right? It was terrible. It was the worst.
Typing the codes out manually.
Oh, and the computer wouldn't. So if you say you were late bringing a DVD back, Christian, right? And I said to you, Christian, there's a £26 fine on that, right? You paid the fine, and let's say, you know, you're somebody belonging to you came down later on really angry, saying, hey, that shouldn't have been a £26 fine. The computer, as soon as the fine was paid, wiped all the records, right? So I was like, this is the worst. So I managed to find a new job in a cinema, right? And
Yeah.
because I loved movies, but that's why I'd gotten the job in the DVD store. The cinema job was amazing. I absolutely loved it. So
Oh,
I made a
cool.
simple change, and I immediately improved my predicament.
Why was working in a cinema so amazing? I mean, besides the obvious.
I loved it because I got to the systems worked firstly, but again, you got to chat to people. Like their cinemas at that time, again, like this is going back a bit, but when streaming wasn't a thing, so people going to the cinema was there were lots of people would go, like, and we used to do like midnight shows at weekends and stuff, which would still be packed.
Cool.
But there were loads of people working there, so there were loads of stories. Plus, you also got tickets to go to. Was it two or two? Yeah, so you got essentially four free tickets a week to go to the cinema. So you could go to two movies, and you could bring somebody in with you. I loved it because the people that worked there, it was a good vibe. Generally, people worked there were somewhat into movies, or you could find people who were, or the projectionists are always lunatics. They project, if you know a projectionist, they're great crack. I guarantee you that much. So it was a good vibe. I got to watch movies, and it was a great college job. None of it was too strenuous, and I wasn't manually having to log things, and people weren't screaming at me for a system that I had nothing to do with not working.
I remember when I worked in that supermarket, I had the same problem because obviously everything was done with these scanner tills, but it was all done. You scan the item, it goes through. But like, I'm sure you've had this where you go in a supermarket and like their scanner thing doesn't work, right? And it didn't happen that often, but it did happen quite regularly, and it would always happen when we were really busy. And the person's waiting like and I will say some customers do need to like relax a little bit, but the system was flawed. Like the number would be like this long, and you have to like type it in. Like it's not touch screen, it's not anything, it's literally like keys on a like old keyboard. And a lot of the time like it wouldn't come up, or I don't know, sometimes I remember having to do stuff manually, like guess the price, and sometimes I get it wrong and I give them like £3 discount or something.
Or you enter it manually and it brings it up wrong, and then they complain, and then you've got to get a manager to take it off the system.
I remember, I've never told this story, but one time I actually made the biggest mistake I ever made working there. Was it was really busy, and this guy was charging his card, and we always had problems with cards. And I thought it went through, right? And I was like, here you go. Thank you very much. He leaves. It didn't go through the system. It didn't charge him. So this guy got a week's worth of shopping, like 50, 60 quid for free. And I said this to, he was like an assistant manager. I was like, hey, so this has happened. And he just looked at me like he just didn't know what to say. He's just like, yeah, I guess we'll look into it. And I knew he was thinking like, yeah, we can't ever say anything about this. Like,
yeah, some things you have to write off. I worked in a music store years ago who had a policy, and this was amazing, whereby you could bring back your CDs and exchange them. As many as you wanted. And we had a guy who used to come in every weekend, and he had about 15 CDs. He'd a stack, and he would put them out. He said, I want to change these for these. He was clearly going home. It was that when burners were first starting, burning the CDs and bringing them back in the next week and saying, I'll exchange them. And I worked there. I wasn't even in Ireland. It was actually in America. I did a J1 summer in America, and I worked there from May to September. Every single weekend he would come in. There was also somebody who came in who paid with a $2 bill. Always all in $2 bills, which are pretty rare. So no idea where this person had acquired all of these $2 bills. But again, throughout the summer, this person came in, spent a lot of money on CDs because everyone bought CDs at that time, but always paid in $2 bills. And I would love to get to the bottom of that mystery as to where they were getting these $2 bills.
I remember one time I was working in my dad's a barber, professional barber. He owns a series of barber shops, and I worked there as like a Saturday boy when I was like 11 or 12 for like a year. To be fair, I worked there for a year. It was kind of crazy. When I look back, I'm like, yeah, it's kind of like child labor, you know, like because it went from like just Saturdays to like Saturday, Sunday, and it was like full time. But whatever. But anyway, I remember like every morning or every couple of mornings, this Asian lady would come by the store or shop, and she'd come through sort of to the back area, and she had like I don't know, like back in the day, you used to have like these bags, but they were like CD bags. You remember those where you'd like slot the CDs in? And,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
So she had one of those full to the brim with like maybe like 50 CDs or whatever. She puts it on the table, and being that I'm an 11, 12-year-old kid, I'm very like loud, like, you know, like, oh wow, what's this? What are these movies? Right. And she puts them down, and my dad's like, shut up. And basically, yeah, they were pirate DVD. This was before, you know, you could watch stuff online, and there was a reason that they were so dirt cheap. But the funny thing was, there was a funny thing about them was that you never knew what the quality would be. So sometimes it'd be a really, really good rip, and it'd be like, oh wow, we don't even have to buy the movie. I mean, look how great this is. And then other times it'd be so bad. It'd be like one of those ones where, you know, like when a movie first comes out now and the pirate's out, but it's like people watching in a cinema and people getting up every 5 seconds and stuff. It'd be like that, and like you couldn't moan. Who are you going to complain to? Like, do you know what I mean? But it'd be like, oh my god! And it's a funny thing because like the lady was so nice, and as far as like the criminal totem pole, it's pretty low down there. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, I always just found the whole thing very bizarre and funny, and yeah, you never see those people anymore.
No, they definitely the internet changed all of that.
Okay, moving it on. I'd like to talk a little bit about your work. Now, obviously, we've touched on a lot of the stuff that you do with your podcast and just in general. But you are, as I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, the senior international officer at Dublin City University in Ireland. So, tell us about some of your responsibilities and what you do in general.
Yeah, so I've been working at DCU for about 18 months or thereabouts, and really love working there. It's a great institution, and I suppose I know the higher ed sector in Ireland really well. I studied at University College Cork. I worked at the Cork Institute of Technology, which actually since the 1st of January is the Munster Technological University. Then I worked at a number of big institutions in Dublin. So I think I've been at like I've been at 4 of the 8 universities, and then like one of the institutes of technology. And Ireland we're lucky that we have such a strong so many good education institutions. But I'm happy and proud to work at DCU, and my work is with international students, obviously, given the title, and I suppose it's a number of different things. It is working on the piece to, I suppose, go out and get students to come to study at DCU, but then to support students along that journey. So everything, so doing kind of the student recruitment fairs, and then kind of doing the webinars to guide the students along the process in terms of, say, immigration application, like making visa applications, dealing with that side of things, arrival into Ireland, what to expect. A little bit then maybe around the kind of cultural adjustment piece, a little bit around the immigration piece after they get here. So a lot of that about and even then I suppose there'll always be different immigration pieces, but say even one of the things that so I did a project in at one of the former institutions that I was at, that I was calling Dublin in December at that stage, because Ireland, a little bit like the UK, but probably even more so, shuts down at Christmas time. Right.
Right.
So institutions close for 2 weeks. And on Christmas Day, everything shuts in Ireland. Like everything. There's no public transport. There are no restaurants. There are no, there's nothing open. And so it was a big shock for international students who came over, who maybe didn't celebrate Christmas at home. And then suddenly, oh, I'll go down to the shop and oh, no, I won't actually. And,
yeah.
And campus accommodation, is pretty empty,
right.
And the and those sports on campus are closed as well. So I noticed that a few years ago. So I kind of implemented a project where I looked to. Because I can't change Ireland, right? I can't change the culture, and I'm not looking to do that, right? People need to have their holidays. They need to spend the time with their families. But what I could do is look to set up communities of support before the Christmas holidays. So get the students to know who else was going to be around, teach them a little bit about what Christmas meant in Ireland, and learn a bit about their holiday traditions. So we would do Christmas decorating workshop, right? And say you and a friend came along, and I'd say, oh, Christian, you can sit at this table here, and your friend can sit at that table, so that, and then you would get to know people at the table. You'd find out who else was going to be staying. And that worked really well. And we did actually a Christmas Day like breakfast event, and it wasn't about the food. Nobody was coming. They weren't getting this grandiose meal, but it was about a chance to come together when the university had already probably been closed for a few days at that point. Everything else is closed, and just an opportunity to come together. So that worked really well. Did that a few years. COVID obviously meant everything changed this year. And so a lot of the teaching was online. And in fairness to DCU, they made that decision very early, which was great because it allowed lecturers time to prepare. It allowed students time to make decisions. But one of the things that I was hearing from the international students was they didn't really they hadn't had the opportunity to socialize with domestic students, and they hadn't had the opportunity to kind of share, because one of the things, right, when you meet new people is you share your stories, right? I talk to you about Ireland, you tell me about, and especially if it's such a different place. So I wanted to try to look at how we could still talk about kind of Christmas traditions in Ireland, but also learn about them. So I did a video project where I asked members of the DCU community. So I asked students and staff and alumni to send in a video, again, about 90 seconds, 30 to 90 seconds, talking about their holiday traditions, whatever it was. And it could be, if it was Christmas, that was great. If they were humanist and they celebrated World Humanist Day, that was great. Whatever it happened to be. Maybe they celebrated winter solstice, whatever. And then I asked the students to share about their holiday traditions. And some of them were still in their home countries. And so they would share maybe about Diwali or about like the Chinese New Year, or different ones, and then we looked to kind of bring those together, and kind of talk, just because holiday celebrations are about, if you listen to the video, it's interesting because there's different rationales behind them and different traditions, but it's all about people coming together to celebrate something, right? It's all about friends gathering and family gathering, and there's food involved in all of them. So the traditions are very similar. So it's about getting people to see that yes, we're different in some ways, but if you scratch beneath the surface, you look at what's bringing us together. And we also did a booklet then on just kind of what to expect in Dublin, and kind of where you can go, what are the traditions, and where can you go for support. But it worked really well. The response to it was really fantastic. And it was just, I was delighted that even virtually, right, because we couldn't necessarily do what we had traditionally done, we're able to find a way to bring people together. So my interest has always been in cultures, in celebrating cultures, and in looking, because culture, it's something we grew up with, right? And it can be so deeply ingrained that we don't even think about it, right? And it's just something we do. And we don't stop to think, well, why do we do that? It's just the way it is. And I find culture fascinating, and I'm interested in it, but equally, I wouldn't go to war for it. And I think that if we can learn and if we can understand each other's cultures a bit more, that helps everyone, like even say communication styles, right? Like we in the UK and Ireland, right, in the West, we tend to kind of play tennis, right? I talk, we knock it back and forth. In some countries, they almost have like chess, and it depends on so for example, especially if there's a power differential, right? So so when somebody finished speaking, you would leave a gap until you came in, right? So if your boss spoke, and the bigger the gap, or perceived gap in power, the longer the pause that you leave.
Right.
Equally, in some place like Brazil, Brazilians tend to juggle, right? Brazilians are amazing in a group because Brazilians will be having a conversation here, they'll be having a conversation over there, and they'll be having a conversation over here. And they're brilliant at bringing people in. But if especially if you're used to playing tennis like we tend to do, you can feel like, hey, we were having a conversation, and now you're having a conversation, and Brazilians are like, but we're all conversing. What are you talking about? So I love having Brazilians in a group. They're brilliant about bringing different people in, but it's learning about those communication styles. It's learning about different cultures. It's recognizing that you won't know everything, that you're going to get it wrong sometimes, and that it's okay to make mistakes. We need to be okay with making mistakes, and we need to be okay with forgiving people for making mistakes if they made it with good intentions, because you can with the best will in the world, you will never get everything right. And definitely in relation to culture, there will be cultural faux pas that you will make that might offend people, but you just have to be willing to hold your hands up and say, sorry, didn't know about that. Or equally, to if somebody does make it, to say, look, don't worry about it, you had no idea. So I think it's interesting. And for international students who come to Ireland, like Ireland we're a phenomenally indirect people. So in the Irish language, there is no direct yes and no. So if you're asking, and so that obviously bleeds, like language bleeds into a culture. So Irish people tend not to be direct. So if say you're working together and you have a report that I really need you to get the report across to me, I'd say something like, hey Christian, firstly, I'd always say, how are you getting on? Or, you'd have to make small talk. And then I'd say, maybe if you get a chance sometime this afternoon, if you get a chance now, you might drop that report over to me, meaning need that right now, like
you
get
might
it
do that.
across.
You might do that.
You might. But if you're from a culture, say, where it's more direct, right? In the Netherlands the Dutch tend to be a much more direct people. You're like, oh, it probably doesn't need it that urgently, right? So, but again, like if you were to go to an Irish person, you made a direct request, it'd be like, that's so offensive. I can't believe they did that. It was just, I heard a great story on Twitter just before Christmas about an Irish woman who had moved to the Netherlands. And so she was kind of said hello to her new neighbors, and her neighbor then called around or saw her, and the neighbor said, just to let you know, we're having a party on Saturday. And the Irish lady said, oh, that's great, what do you want me to bring? And the Dutch lady said, no, I'm not saying that to invite you, I'm saying that just so that you know that there's a party. And talk about two because in Ireland, you see, you wouldn't ask somebody directly to the party in case they, because again, you just don't ask directly. So I'd say, hey Christian, yeah, a few of us are getting together there on Saturday, meaning like you're invited. And again, like things like even language, like for example, the double positive is actually a negative in Ireland. So if I said, if you said to me, oh, hey, Hugo's having a party, are you coming? And I said, I am, yeah. Am I going to the party?
I mean, I would have said yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I'm not. I have, yeah. That's in Ireland. That's like, not a hope am I going to that thing.
Oh well,
So
like
again,
fuck that, like
yeah, like I am,
Oh,
yeah.
so it's more like sarcasm then. It's like,
Yeah,
oh,
but if
I am,
you're,
yeah, like,
but
not.
if, but like a lot of times it's said with a purely straight face. Or even if you're going to, even if you're going to be nice to somebody, like say I knew you, right, or somewhat, or even if I didn't know you, say we were just hanging out in college, right, in first week, and you didn't have €2 to get a coffee, and you're like, hey, can you lend me €2? And I'm like, do you think I'm a bank? Right? I'm going to give you the €2, but I'm going to slag you about it first. But if you're from a culture where people don't do that, that's really hurtful. So, and that's the little cultural nuances that I hope we never lose, but that it's important we learn about, right? Because that's a piece that you have to learn. So I've or time, Irish people like, and time, with the concept of ish. So you'd say to somebody, yeah, I'll meet you in the pub. Yeah, I'll probably be there about 9ish. Like, again, people from a really kind of time sensitive culture will be there at 9. The Irish person mightn't show up till 10:30. And they're like, either they're gone or they're like, but you said you're going to be, yeah, but 9ish, like it's 10:30. I mean, things happened, like, or the famous one in Ireland as well is like, yeah, I'm just about to leave the house. I'll be there about 10 minutes. Leave the house. You probably haven't even gotten into the shower yet. So I just find those little cultural intricacies really interesting. We all have them. Every single culture has them in different ways. And so to me, some of the most fun interactions over the last 15 years that I've been kind of working in the sector, particularly 12 years with international students, have been especially around those kind of like learning about culture, learning about cultural intricacies. And I've been very fortunate to get to travel quite a bit and to meet people, and people have been so wonderfully generous in terms of hosting me and showing me around their beautiful countries.
I've all of those things that you mentioned, actually, like in England, I've experienced all of that. So it's interesting you said they're sort of Irish specific, because it's like literally all of those things, like the sarcasm thing. Yeah, I mean, maybe I might not be so blunt with that, but like I've definitely been like that before, and definitely the ish thing. That's, I mean, to me, I think there's a differentiation. If you say like I will be there at 9, and you're like really blunt, then it's like, yeah, be there or else. But if you say 9ish, yeah, I mean that kind of allows for like half an hour, maybe a bit more. Like it's ish. It's like,
yeah,
I'll aim to be there at that time, but like don't get upset if I'm not.
Yeah, exactly. No, I do think there are a lot of similarities between Ireland and the UK. I mean, look, people travel over a lot of Irish people with heritage, but I will say that when I go to the UK, and I've traveled over quite a bit, people in the UK tend to obey rules more so than in Ireland. Like even crossing the street, like I'm just like the light there, there's no green man, or I'm just crossing in a random place. And I'm looking, going, why is no one else crossing? And they're looking at me, going, I can't believe he's doing that. I mean, so there are little intricacies, but definitely Ireland and the UK do share a lot, and particularly I think in terms of humor and sarcasm. English and Irish people, or British people, the Scots are great in that as well. But there are similarities, but that's not shared everywhere. I can tell you.
No, I couldn't agree more. I think when I started living in Europe, I noticed that even more so, and it's kind of taught me to be a lot more blunt now that I've returned to the UK. With regard, or maybe not blunt, but like more direct with things. I prefer doing things that way. Like being, it saves a lot of time, I feel. But even some of those things that you mentioned, like I feel like it is like a choice thing. Like for example, you give the crossing the road example. Like I remember growing up, yeah, everyone would just do that. But like as you get older, I think you kind of realize like I'm a fool for doing it. Screw this. I don't care what people think. If there's no cars around like for miles, right? We're not going to stand and wait for even the people in the cars will look at you like, are you an idiot or something? Get cross. So yeah, I do think it comes down a little bit to just common sense, but yeah, it's what it is. Yeah, moving it forward, I just want to talk a little bit about just like your perspective on like Ireland and COVID-19 and stuff, because I've spoken to some guests that have lived there, but not an actual Irish person. So I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on, well, firstly, like how COVID-19 affected you personally, your job, your personal life, this kind of stuff. And then just in general, how has Ireland, and you said you're residing in Dublin, obviously,
Mhm.
so Dublin as well. How have Ireland and Dublin sort of responded to the pandemic?
Um, so I mean, there are many phases to it. I have been very fortunate in terms of my work because I have been able to work from home, and I've been able to continue to work, and the university has remained open. We've worked remotely, for the most part, and I don't like, I don't think anyone, no, certainly, I, other than anyone from our office didn't have to go in. Obviously, they say they were if there were lecturers who were doing particular subjects, they may have had to go in to deliver labs and things like that. But for me, over the last couple of years, a lot of my work would have been online anyway, meetings,
Okay.
because you can't always travel. But the travel aspect, I mean, I was earlier last year now. So prior to when COVID arrived, I had been in Malaysia, I had been in India, I had been in Ghana, and I was just about to go to Nigeria. And then we were advised that we would be, because we held EU passports, we would be held in quarantine,
Oh
because
wow.
the virus was really kind of rampant in the EU at that stage. So I came back, and as soon as I arrived, they announced kind of lockdown measures in Ireland. So I've been working at home since then. Now, I've been very fortunate as well because I do the podcast, because I do the NFL punditry stuff. My workspace here around me is not only associated with work, right? In the evening
Right.
time,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
becomes a space that I really, it's not only associated. I've been very fortunate that way. And I you know I the it's not shared, like it's not shared accommodation. It's my girlfriend and I, so we don't have housemates. Like, again, it would be a much different experience for people. I really feel like for people who are just beginning their careers, it must be very tough. Like, because obviously I haven't been to the pub since March. That's where I would have met my friends. I used to go to a kind of a gig every fortnight. I would have traveled a lot for work, but I would have also traveled a lot myself. So I haven't had those opportunities, but those are sacrifices that you have to make. I think the response in terms of the institutions, I'm very proud of DCU in terms of making decisions early, and I think the initial response in Ireland was really good for international students. So they said anyone who lost work would be able to claim the pandemic unemployment payment. Didn't matter like whether you were an international student or where you were from. If you lost your job because of it, you could claim that. They also allowed international students who were still working. They recognized that no matter what area you're working in, if you were still working in April, you were an essential worker in many respects, because you had to keep supply chains going, you had to keep shops open. So they allowed those students to work full time. Ordinarily, international students can work 20 hours a week. They were allowed to work full time, 40 hours a week. Which again was really important in terms of keeping things going. So I thought that was really good. And I suppose, like, Ireland's response, we gotten the virus rates down a lot. I think I would say that it the things have changed over the last few weeks. Certainly, we've seen an enormous spike in cases, because there was a decision made to open up the hospitality sector prior to Christmas, and that when that happened, and if you if you tell people something is safe, then people are going to go out and enjoy it, right?
Yeah.
Why would you not if you're told it's okay to do so? But that, coupled with people gathering for Christmas, meant that we have seen an enormous spike. We had 6,000 cases a couple of days ago, which in an Irish context, it's a small island. That's a lot of cases, and so that has for me, it was my first Christmas that I didn't go home.
Mm.
My my mother is not getting any younger, so that was a very tough decision not to be at home at Christmas, but we just felt it was the right thing to do. But that was a decision we made. I could understand why other people just made other decisions, but we are about to, literally, I would say, this afternoon. I don't know what time we're going to, similarly to what happened in the UK, we're about to go into lockdown
Okay.
again. Though we're not doing the tier 5 of a 3-tier system. We always had a level 5 system, so we're going to be level 5.
Yeah, I don't understand that. Like they're calling it TIFF, but I mean it's lockdown, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
The whole thing with the UK government is that the tier system has been a farce since the beginning. But I'm interested, like with Ireland, so you haven't had like tiers at all or any kind of
No,
lockdown?
we have had tiers, but like from what I understood, there was like, yeah, the way the tiers have worked in the UK has been a little bit strange. I think in Ireland, like some of it goes back to and my like they made a decision in what would you over the summer to allow certain pubs to open if people got a substantial meal, a €9 meal.
Oh yeah,
Okay,
we had that as well. Yeah.
and that to me, right, that shit, like, because what happened was people bought into the first lockdown and people understood
Yeah.
what had happened. But once you did that, people began, understandably, from my perspective, people were like, hang on now, so I can go to this pub but I can't go to that pub. And why? Because the meal will magically make me immune. So the €9 magical immunity meal, I think that was an error. I think either open it or don't open it. Personally, I wouldn't, but that's me. I recognize that, like, it's really difficult for business owners. It's not at all easy. But when the virus is out of control anyway, your economy isn't going to be good. So it's like having it feels, especially now, because we were watching things kind of play out in the UK and kind of going, oh, that seems a bit silly to be doing that. And then we did the exact same.
Oh
Um,
wow. Okay.
but it feels like, for the Ireland and the UK, it's like the worst of all worlds, right? Because you haven't, you've put so many people at risk in both countries. Your health service is massively under strain. You have huge numbers of people being diagnosed with the virus every day, and you're still locked down, right? Which
Mm.
has a huge impact on everybody, like on kids. Like, and I'm very fortunate that I'm at a part of my career where I'm reasonably well enough established that it's not going to, massively impact me. I have a secure job. I have been fortunate to travel. I'm fortunate to have interests that I can do. If I was 24, 25, I'm just starting out, I don't know how secure my job is. You're trying to date, dating in a COVID world. You all those travel plans that you had, that maybe you'd save some money, that is suddenly gone. You're sharing a house with 4 or 5 other people. How much control do you have over who's coming into your house? I recognize how fortunate I am in that respect, and so it has not been easy or fun, but I have it much better than other people, and I just hope that we can really roll out the vaccine as quickly as possible, because we certainly want to be in a position when we're going into kind of next September, October, you're going back into the winter, where you have a critical mass of people vaccinated, because you want people, like for students, I know how great my college experience was, and part of it was what I learned, sure, but the other part of it was getting to be on campus, getting to do all the student events and activities and social stuff. I had a friend and me, we used to write comedy sketches, and we did a comedy sketch show. We had people come along to it. Like, it's different doing it online. Like, again, I'm fortunate in that, like, the podcast stuff and this is great, but like, how much more fun would it be to be able to do this over pints in a pub? That's the type of stuff that you do miss out on, and so that college experience is different. So I really hope we can get to a point where the academic year 21-22 looks a lot different, but it's equally one of the things in Ireland that is I suppose very different is funerals are usually a social event in Ireland. It's an event. It's really important, right? You would, if needs be, take time off work to attend the funeral of a friend's relative. And it is the entire community comes together, and obviously that can't happen now. You're limited to like 10 people at a funeral, and so the grieving process has massively changed at a time where people are losing people, and I think the after effects from this will linger for a lot of time as people kind of wrestle with grief and wrestle with what they have lost, and so it's not at all easy. And I just hope that we put we take lessons from this. We talk a lot about learning lessons, but I hope that they are, because we know pandemics happen. For years, I don't know how long I've heard about like the influenza after the First World War, and look, that happened, and it would happen again, and we were overdue it. So I hope that lessons are learned and we move forward. But we are in a really difficult position in Ireland, I think, just like the UK, where levels now are above where they were in March. And so the reality is that certainly for the next 3 weeks at least, we are looking at a very, very strict lockdown until the end of January. And then I think they will reassess at the beginning of February and try and make a decision from there.
What's been the impact that you've seen on the sort of Irish economy? Because I know in the UK it's been, I mean, they haven't said it's like recession, but they've definitely said that it's massively hit, like, our GDP and stuff, and there's been massive rises in unemployment, etc. And of course that's the same case in every country, but obviously being that Ireland is quite a small nation, and also I remember as well, I don't know if it's still the case now, but I remember, for example, in Dublin, it's a very expensive place to live, and just. And I remember that being the case like 7 years ago, for example, when I visited. So, like what's been the impact for you guys economy-wise?
Yeah, big economic hit, and it's again really tough because Dublin is very expensive. We have an issue with property, and it hasn't been addressed by successive governments now. There is not enough houses for people, and so property is really expensive, and rents are really expensive. Okay. And what you've had a lot of vulture funds that have come in and bought up massive apartment blocks and kind of they're behaving like landlords, and they can afford to leave places vacant until they get the money that they want. I think, like everywhere, the, the big boys have been okay. They've been almost inoculated. Like some industries in Ireland, like the tech industry, you know, I mean, look, we're all using more tech pharmaceuticals. You know, Ireland has some industries that have remained strong and will continue to do so. But it's the small businesses, it's the small pubs.
Yeah.
Those are things that some of them have already said they're closed, they're done, they won't open up. Like one of my favorite coffee shops in the city, they're gone, and another has fortunately kept going, and I go out every day to get a coffee, try and keep them going. But it's like I know one, like just up the road from me, probably about a 5-minute walk, there is a pub. It was known as kind of a music pub, right? They used to do what are known as sessions in Ireland, right? Musicians would come and they'd all play together. It wasn't necessarily organized. You could just go down there if you played the guitar or the fiddle or you know, the uilleann pipes.
What was the place called?
It was Baker's. It was up. There's a few different ones. The Cobblestone is probably the most famous for that, but it's closed. And just down the road from it is a pub that's been opened up by a group, a multinational corporation who own all of these pubs and restaurants, and they have a property construction company, and they've opened a sort of a replica, but like it's that my fear is that when we do open back up, right,
It's just going to be
and
corporations, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
like it's corporate. I mean,
See, people don't want that though. Do you know what I mean?
I hope not, but it's difficult when people don't have money. They will generally go with the cheapest option.
Right.
And so like we didn't have a Weatherspoons in Ireland up until, I don't know, 5 years ago, and all of a sudden we've a load of them popping up, and
That's
they're
a
cheap. Yeah, no, it's awful. And that is the concern that I have, that we're just going to see what we've seen in America in many respects. And I've been going to America a long time, and just the death of the smaller businesses and the rise of the mega corporations. And like that was one of the to have been in Dublin for 15 years and to see it change, go through that initial bubble, and then it burst. But like we have so many Starbucks in Dublin, and Starbucks is fine. They serve, they can serve a purpose. But when all you have left is Starbucks, then we as a society, we as a people need to ask serious questions around what we want to be, and if we don't want that, how do we try to ensure the survival of small businesses, because otherwise it will just be working for the Jeff Bezoses, and that will be sad.
Ugh, scary thoughts, like a horror movie, isn't it?
Yes,
Oh.
indeed.
As we draw everything to a close for today, I just wanted to ask you, do you have any upcoming projects or maybe some final thoughts that you'd like to leave with us?
So I suppose in terms of upcoming projects, the NFL is actually coming into its playoffs and the championship part of the season. So we're hoping until they happen, you're never sure about the interviews with like coaches and players and stuff, but we're hoping that there will we have some things lined up which should be really good, and just looking forward to that. We've actually only been able to record once in person because of COVID. That was great, and that's something we obviously want to try to do again. Adventures in Advising has plenty more episodes to come, and in terms of things to live by, just, I mean, as much as a horror movie as things are, I'm I am an inherent optimist and believer in people, and people are great. And I really believe that the majority of people are good people, and they would go out of their way to help you. And I think that the world can be a scary place. And I think if you watch the news all the time, all you would see is all of the terrible things. But I hope that when vaccinations happen and when we can all get back together, there will be a sense of joy and vibrancy. And I suppose it's trying to for me, the way I see life is life boils down to three things: love, laughter, loss. And right now there's a lot of loss, and there's a lot of loss that we can't control. So try and control the other two. Try and put laughter into your life in whatever way you can find it, right? Whether that's comedy, whether that's TV shows that you enjoy, whether that's books you enjoy. And the same with love, whatever like form that takes. As I said, if you're somebody trying to date in 2021, that's real tough. But like, try and find other things that you love, whether it's books, whether it's movies, whether it's just trying to connect. Because I think this has taken a toll on friendships as well, because it's difficult to try um, to schedule in the same way, especially when people have children, like, but try and find that the passion that you have, whatever it is, and pour that in, because there are going to be losses that you can't control at the moment. So love and laughter are going to be more important than ever.
Thank you so much. That's a really nice sentiment. I'm sure our listeners will really appreciate that. So thank you. I just want to say a massive thank you for agreeing to be on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I really encourage my viewers to go check out Colum's various different podcasts and everything that he's doing. Very busy man, but obviously you've got a lot to say, and I think it's worth listening to. So make sure you go and check him out.
Cheers. Thanks, Christian. Yeah, I definitely haven't wanted for the gift of the gab, as we would say in Ireland. So thank you. It's been a lot of fun to chat to you today.
Awesome. And I will say thank you very much to all the listeners of the Christian Reeve podcast. As always, let me know who you would like to see on the show next, what you would like to hear on the show. Let me know just your thoughts in general. As we're in 2021 now, we're over 50 episodes. I think it's like 53 now or something like that. So onwards on the road towards 100 episodes. Let me know your thoughts. Your thoughts are important to me, as always. And keep listening, keep subscribing, sharing, whatever it is you do with the podcast. I really appreciate all the support. And until next time, peace out, one love. I'll see you in the next one. Ciao.